My name's Emma Gallagher. I built my business from scratch, bought my parents a house, and covered my sister's car loan. But last Sunday, over roast chicken and Chardonnay, they called me selfish for not doing more. By the time dessert hit the table, I realized something chilling. I wasn't the daughter or sister. I was the family ATM. Have you ever had your generosity thrown back in your face? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I'd love to know how far this story reaches. And trust me, you'll want to stick around for what comes next. It started with a wine glass and one carefully sharpened sentence. "You could do more for the family," my mother said, dabbing her mouth with a cloth napkin like she was delivering wisdom instead of a slap. "Especially since you have no children." My grip on the stem of my glass tightened. I smiled barely. "Excuse me." The dining room was warm with that forced kind of cheer. Suburban Denver. A cozy table set for 6. My father chewing silently like always. My sister Vanessa pretending to check her phone. Her husband Kyle adding nothing, just smirking at his plate like this was all beneath him. Mom went on, still calm, still deliberate. "Vanessa has a family to support. You're fortunate you can afford to help more." The room spun a little, not from the wine. I set down my fork, carefully, deliberately. "I already pay your mortgage, your insurance, and I laid out Vanessa when she couldn't cover her car loan." "You offered," Vanessa chimed in sweetly. She had the exact smug expression of someone who knew she could light a match and blame the wind. "I did," I snapped, "because I thought it was temporary." Vanessa gave a dramatic sigh, tossing her curls. "Maybe you're just jealous I have a family and you have a business." I stood so fast my chair scraped hard against the floor. "You're not entitled to my success." The silence was instant, almost theatrical. Forks paused midair. Dad coughed like he wanted to intervene but didn't know how. Kyle said nothing typical. I scanned their faces. The people I had spent a lifetime trying to please. Birthday gifts, emergency loans, late-night phone calls, every sacrifice tucked under the rug of what I thought was love. But this wasn't love. It was entitlement dressed as tradition. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just placed my napkin beside my plate and looked my mother dead in the eye. "Don't talk to me about not helping. Not unless you're ready to return the favor." Then I turned, heels clicking on the tile, the weight of every year I'd held this family together falling off my shoulders one bitter step at a time. I didn't even take dessert. And trust me, I love dessert. But nothing sweet was going to fix this. Back at my downtown condo, the silence felt louder than anything said at that table. I kicked off my heels and left them by the door like I always did. Except this time they looked like they belonged to someone else. Someone too polished, too prepared for a dinner that ended in war. The city buzzed outside my windows, but I barely noticed. I stood in the center of my living room, surrounded by curated peace, plants trimmed just so, the soft hum of my air purifier, my cat Willow asleep in the sun. But inside me, chaos. I walked straight to my office. My home office had always been my sanctuary, where I built my design agency from a single client to a 7-figure portfolio, where I solved problems and stayed 2 steps ahead. But that night, I opened my laptop with shaking hands and pulled up something I hadn't looked at in years. My family expenses spreadsheet. There it was, line by line, month by month, year by year. Mortgage for Mom and Dad, $1,200 a month, on auto draft. Insurance premiums I quietly picked up when Dad lost his job and never took them back, $900 a month. The car loan for Vanessa, $8,000, paid in 3 chunks. I hadn't even added interest. Scrolling through the tabs, I caught a note I'd left myself years ago. "Helping them now means peace later." I stared at those words like they belonged to a stranger. Was I really still believing that? I clicked on another tab, gifts and one-offs. The number at the bottom made my stomach twist. $38,415.72. That was just the extra stuff, trips, birthday gifts, bailouts. And not once, not a single time, had anyone said thank you. My chest felt tight, like grief and anger had crawled up and wrapped around my lungs. I leaned back in my chair, trying to breathe through it. Maybe I could have ignored it. Maybe I would have again. But the way Vanessa had smirked at me. That smugness wasn't born last week. It had roots, deep ones. And suddenly I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. I must have been 14. Vanessa was 10. It was a Friday night, storming outside, and Vanessa had snuck out to meet a boy from her school. She came back soaked, crying, mascara down her cheeks because he'd stood her up. I remember how Mom wrapped her in a towel, made cocoa, told her how beautiful she was. "Boys are stupid," she'd said, kissing her forehead. Meanwhile, I got grounded for forgetting to take the trash out. I had always followed the rules, got the grades, took the jobs, built the life. And they'd always treated me like the safety net. Not the daughter, not the sister, the safety net. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. Harper. She didn't even wait for me to open the door. She had her own key and a sixth sense for when I was unraveling. My best friend since college, Harper was the kind of person who brought snacks to emotional breakdowns. She walked in carrying Thai takeout and a bottle of wine. "I figured you didn't eat dinner," she said, setting it down on the kitchen island. "I had 3 bites of chicken and a serving of character assassination," I replied, slumping onto a stool. She raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" I told her everything. The dinner, the accusation, Vanessa's dig, the silence that followed when I stood up for myself. Harper didn't interrupt, just poured the wine, slid a container of Pad CEO my way, and listened. When I finished, I expected her usual dry wit. Instead, she asked, "And what are you going to do now?" I blinked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said slowly, "you finally called them out. You finally walked out. What happens next?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I'm exhausted. I've spent years doing everything for them because I thought that's what love looked like. And now I'm sitting here wondering if they've ever really loved me back or just loved what I could give them." Harper nodded, then leaned in. "Emma, it's time you decide if this is the life you're willing to keep living, because it's not going to stop, not unless you stop it." She was right. They'd keep asking, and I'd keep giving, until there was nothing left of me but a generous ghost. I looked around my condo, everything I'd built on my own, my name on the deed, my name on the business, my name on every bank account, invoice, and contract. And yet, in my own family's eyes, it was like none of it mattered, because I wasn't a mother, because I was alone, because I'd made it without needing to be saved. Well, maybe it was time to save myself from them. I looked at Harper, finally letting the truth fall from my lips. "I'm done." 1 week passed. 7 days of silence from my family. Not a text, not a call. Not even one of Dad's awkward check-ins that usually came after family blow-ups, like he wanted credit for being Switzerland. Honestly, the quiet was disorienting. I had braced myself for retaliation, for Vanessa to post something vague and venomous on social media, for Mom to guilt-trip me with, "You've hurt the family" monologues, but nothing came until Saturday morning. It was one of those gray Colorado days when the air smells like wet cement and the clouds hang too low, pressing on your skin. I was curled up on my balcony with a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. "Mom, family dinner, important matters to discuss. Saturday, 6 p.m., your presence is expected." Expected. No hope to see you, no let's talk, no apology, just a command. I stared at the message like it might rearrange itself into something softer, but it didn't. They wanted another dinner, another round. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I tossed my phone on the cushion and tried to focus on the sound of the rain. Expected. The word rang in my head like a judge's gavel. By noon, I was sitting across from Harper at our favorite coffee shop, still turning the message over in my mind. She sipped her lavender latte and said what I couldn't. "They're up to something." I nodded. "It's the wording, like they've already decided what they're going to say. I'm just the audience." "Or the sacrifice," she muttered. That got a half smile from me. "Thanks for the pep talk." "I'm serious, Emma. They didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge what happened last week. Now they want you back at the table like nothing happened. That's not a dinner, it's a setup." She wasn't wrong. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't go, I'd miss something, information, a shift, an opportunity to finally draw the line in permanent ink. "I'm going," I said quietly. Harper raised a skeptical brow. "You sure? I need to see what they're planning, and I need to show them I'm not afraid of their expectations anymore." She leaned back in her chair. "All right, but promise me this, whatever happens, you don't let them rewrite the truth. Don't let them guilt you back into silence." "I won't." I said it with more certainty than I felt. but I meant it. That evening, as the storm rolled in over Denver, I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house looked the same, red brick, black shutters, the porch light flickering slightly in the wind, but it felt different. Smaller, heavier. Inside, the lights were warm. A fire crackled in the living room. The smell of roasted garlic and lemon chicken wafted through the hallway. Vanessa opened the door before I could knock. She looked surprised. "You came," I shrugged. "You invited me." She stepped aside, her expression unreadable. "Mom's plating up." The dining room looked like a magazine cover, Mom's way of controlling the narrative. Fine china, cloth napkins, candles, fake harmony. Dad sat at the head of the table, fiddling with the cork on a bottle of wine. "Emma," he said with a forced smile, "good to see you." I nodded, sitting down across from Vanessa. No one spoke for a full minute. Then Mom entered with the main dish, smiling like last week hadn't happened. "I made your favorite," she said sweetly. "Garlic chicken and lemon orzo." I thanked her out of habit, not kindness. We passed the food around in silence, each of us pretending this was normal, but I could feel it, the weight behind their glances. The air was tight with anticipation. Then Dad cleared his throat. "Here it comes." "You know, Emma," he began, setting down his fork, "we've all been thinking." Vanessa straightened in her seat. "We think," Dad continued, "since you don't have children and Vanessa does, it might make sense for you to help with her new mortgage." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" He spoke slowly, like I might need help understanding. "You've always been the successful one. You've said yourself how fortunate you are. Vanessa and Kyle are trying to build a home for their family, and we thought, you thought I should help pay for it," I finished for him, voice cool. "Because I'm childless and therefore apparently owe everyone my earnings." Vanessa didn't even flinch. "It's not about owing anyone, it's about fairness." Fairness, that word again. Always twisted to justify their entitlement. I set my napkin down slowly, looked my father in the eye, then my mother, and finally Vanessa. "No," silence, just like before. "No," Vanessa echoed, like she hadn't heard me correctly. "That's right," I said evenly. "Absolutely not," her eyes narrowed. "You're just bitter and selfish." "No," I said, rising to my feet. "I'm just done being your wallet." Then I walked out again. But this time it wasn't an escape. It was an exit, a decision. And for the first time in years, it felt like I was walking toward something, not away. The city felt colder that night. Or maybe it was just me. I parked outside Harper's apartment without even texting first. She'd once told me, "My door's always open, even if you just need to breathe near someone who loves you." Tonight, I needed more than breath. I needed someone to help me keep from unraveling. When she opened the door, one look at my face, and she said, "Whiskey or wine?" I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "Yes." She poured both. We sat on her rooftop patio, wrapped in fleece blankets, the Denver skyline stretching wide behind us, Christmas lights twinkling like the city was mocking me with forced cheer. Harper handed me a glass, then waited. I didn't speak for a full minute, just stared into the rim of my drink like it might tell me why the people I'd loved the longest were the ones who had learned how to hurt me most efficiently. Finally, I said, "They asked me to help with Vanessa's new mortgage." Harper swore softly. I nodded, my throat burning. "Because I don't have kids and she does, so apparently my bank account is community property." Harper didn't interrupt. She just let the silence do its work. And when I said no, finally, she called me selfish. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Selfish. After years of covering bills, bailing her out, sitting through every emergency she created like a faithful bystander, I said one boundary, and suddenly I'm the villain. I hadn't meant to cry, I really hadn't. But there it was, hot, silent tears slipping down my cheeks, blurring the city lights. Harper reached over and squeezed my hand. "I think," I whispered, "what hurts the most is how easy it was for them, like they'd rehearsed it, like there wasn't even guilt. They didn't see you as a person, Emma," Harper said softly. "They saw you as a solution." I blinked hard. That landed deep. "They keep saying family means sacrifice," I murmured. "But I'm starting to think they just meant my sacrifice." Harper's grip tightened. "You're not crazy, you're not cold, you're not ungrateful. You've been emotionally and financially used. And the second you stopped playing your role, they turned on you." I covered my face with both hands. "I don't even know what happens next. I feel like they're going to retaliate, like this isn't over." "It's not," she said. Which is why you better start preparing like this is war. I pulled my hands away and looked at her. Harper didn't flinch. I'm serious. This isn't just a toxic argument. This is a system you've been holding up with your money, your time, your silence. You knock out the support beam, and the whole house is gonna come crashing down. People don't thank you for that, Em. They blame you. I stared at her, stunned by how right she was. They're going to spin this, she added. Make you the villain, paint you as greedy, cruel, unstable. You've seen how they work, you know they won't go quietly. I took a deep, shaky breath. I need a plan, I said. You need a paper trail, Harper corrected. Receipts, transfers, every financial favor you ever gave them. If they're going to lie, you need the truth written in ink and backed by numbers. I nodded slowly. We build a case, she continued. You gather everything, every payment, every message, every can you spot me just this once? You start documenting like your life depends on it. Because in a way, it did, my financial life, my emotional sanity, my professional reputation, all of it. Harper looked at me, eyes clear, voice firm. You've done enough surviving, Emma. It's time to start defending. It started as a whisper. At first, I thought I was imagining it. A coworker at the office water cooler glanced at me, then quickly turned away mid-sentence. Another offered a tight-lipped smile, the kind that isn't friendly, it's polite discomfort. I tried to shrug it off. But by Wednesday, it wasn't just whispers, it was echoes. Did you hear what happened with Emma's family? She's cutting them off, apparently. I heard she's suing her parents. Can you believe that? Suing? I almost laughed when I heard that one. It was so absurd it looped around to insulting. Until I realized someone was feeding these lies. By Friday, I had confirmation. Harper sent me screenshots. My cousin Rachel had posted on Facebook. Some people forget who raised them. Family isn't a subscription you cancel when it's inconvenient. Then Aunt Marie chimed in. It's sad when success turns people cold. There were likes, comments, commiseration from people I hadn't seen in years, all painting me as the villain. The wealthy, selfish daughter who'd abandoned her struggling family. The sister who was too good for the rest of us. The childless career woman who just didn't understand what it meant to really give. The narrative was clear and it was effective. They weren't trying to change my mind. They were trying to destroy my image. I sat on my office couch, phone in hand, thumb frozen above the reply button. But I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the files I'd started collecting. Harper had helped me organize them into categories. Bank transfers, over $75,000 in total across 7 years. Rent, insurance, surprise emergencies. Text messages. Can you help with this just one more time? We'll pay you back soon. Don't tell Dad I asked again. Emails. Polite requests from Vanessa for bridge loans that never bridged anywhere. Apologies with no action. Receipts, mortgage statements with my name on the payment confirmations. I stared at the evidence, so much of it. A digital graveyard of every time I chose them over myself. And now, they'd turned me into the villain. I stopped the auto payments that day. The mortgage, the insurance, the automatic debit I'd been covering for my father's medical premiums. Not out of malice, out of necessity. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I wasn't their silent sponsor. I was Emma Gallagher, and I was done. That night I called Harper. They've gone public, I said, pacing my kitchen. They're painting me like I'm some cold-blooded heiress who's abandoned them. What did you expect? She said gently. People like your family don't like being cut off. They don't grieve, they retaliate. She was right. I scrolled through more messages. One stood out from my high school best friend, Lisa. Hey, just wanted to say I've seen what people are saying and I don't believe it. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. It was just one message, but it felt like an oxygen mask after days underwater. Harper's voice pulled me back. Have you told them you're stopping payments? I paused. No, but they'll notice. They'll notice and they'll come knocking. I stared out the window. The storm wasn't coming. It had already begun. It happened on a Thursday night. I was deep into quarterly reports, half listening to lo-fi music, curled under a throw blanket on my sectional when the doorbell rang. At first, I ignored it. Probably a package or some neighborhood kid selling wrapping paper for a fundraiser. But then it rang again. 3 sharp chimes. Urgent, unapologetic. Willow, my cat, bolted from the couch, tail puffed like she knew something I didn't. I stood, hesitated, then checked the security monitor. And there they were, my parents, on my doorstep. I could see the tension in my father's shoulders, my mother pacing behind him, holding her phone like it was both weapon and lifeline. I didn't want to open the door, but I did. The second the latch clicked, my mother's voice pierced the night. "How could you?" I didn't answer. I just stood in the doorway, half inside, half out, one foot planted in my peace, the other dragged into their chaos. Dad stepped forward. "You stopped the mortgage payments. Your mother's health insurance lapsed. Do you know what you've done?" I kept my voice calm. "Yes, I stopped paying for things that aren't my responsibility." Mom looked like she might cry or explode. It was always a coin toss. "We are your family, Emma. What kind of daughter abandons her parents like this?" "You didn't think you were abandoning me," I said sharply, "when you sat there and asked me to pay for Vanessa's house like it was my duty." "That's different," she snapped. "No," I said, stepping fully outside now, the door half closed behind me. "It's exactly the same. I said no for once, and now you're here to punish me for it." Dad's face hardened. "We raised you." My mouth went dry, but the words came anyway. "No, you trained me to give, to absorb, to keep the peace. You didn't raise a daughter, you raised an asset." My mother gasped. "How dare you?" "How dare you," I shot back, "for using love like a leash, for turning my success into your safety net, for never once asking if I was okay while handing me another bill." There was a pause. For a split second, I thought maybe something would land. But then my father stepped closer. "You owe us," he said. "You wouldn't have what you have if not for us." I didn't flinch. "I earned every dollar with work you never saw, nights you never asked about, sacrifices you didn't even bother to notice. And you know what?" I raised my phone and tapped record. "I don't owe you, I owe me, the woman who built this life when nobody showed up but expected a cut anyway." My mother's eyes widened as she realized I was filming. "Are you recording us?" she demanded. "Yes," I said, "because I'm done letting you twist the story." That broke the facade. Dad raised his voice. "This is disgusting, Emma. You've lost your mind." "No," I said, calm now. "I've found it, and I'm keeping the receipts." I didn't slam the door, I didn't scream, I just stepped back into my home, the one I paid for with every late night and early morning, and closed the door. Their muffled shouting carried on the other side, but I didn't hear the words anymore. I heard freedom. 2 weeks passed. I thought the worst was behind me. I'd stopped payments, faced them down on my porch, recorded their meltdown for my own protection, even started sleeping better, at least a little. But peace in my family is just the space between grenades. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address, just my name printed in blocky legal font. I opened it without thinking, and felt the blood drain from my face. Notice of civil action. Claim, financial support owed and emotional damages. Amount, $350,000. I read it twice, then a third time. My parents were suing me, suing me. I stood frozen in my kitchen, the letter trembling in my hands, the clock ticking so loudly it felt like a countdown. When I finally called Harper, my voice barely worked. "They filed a lawsuit." Silence. "You're joking," she said. "I wish I were." She was at my door 15 minutes later, hair still wet, eyeliner smudged. "Let me see it." I handed her the papers and watched her face shift from disbelief to fury. "This is garbage," she said, flipping pages. "They're claiming emotional distress because you stopped supporting them, and what is this? Verbal contract based on family precedent. They're weaponizing everything," I whispered. "All the times I helped, all the times I said, of course, and don't worry about it, they're trying to turn that into legal proof I owe them." "And they brought this to court?" she asked, scanning the page. "Oh God, there's a hearing date." 2 weeks out. I sank into the couch, numb. "Do you know what this means, Harper, if they win? If this holds up, I'll owe more than I've even given them." She sat beside me. "We're not letting this happen." But even as she said it, I could feel the walls closing in. This wasn't just emotional warfare anymore. This was a full-blown siege. The day of the first hearing was gray and bitter. The courtroom was small, quiet, impersonal. I sat at the defendant's table, alone. No lawyer yet, just a folder of records on my lap and trembling hands I couldn't hide. My parents sat on the other side, dressed for pity, Mom in soft blues, Dad looking frail, like he aged 10 years in a week. I didn't know the woman sitting behind them until she took the stand. "Alicia," the clerk announced. "Cousin of the defendant." My stomach dropped. Alicia, my cousin, my former friend. The girl I'd loaned money to 3 years ago when her rent check bounced. The one who'd cried on my couch after her breakup. She was testifying for them. I just remember Emma always saying she'd take care of her parents, Alicia said sweetly, voice trembling. She was proud of it. I think she even told me once, I'll always make sure they're okay, no matter what. I gripped the edge of my seat. A lie, no, worse. A half-truth twisted until it strangled me. Then came Aunt Marie. She's changed, Marie said, eyes darting toward me. Ever since she got that condo, that business, she started acting like she was above us, like family was a burden. The judge nodded slowly, took notes. I felt like I was outside my body watching a nightmare play out. No one mentioned the years of payments. No one brought up the endless phone calls asking for help. No one talked about what it cost me to always say yes. When the hearing ended, I stepped out into the hallway, dizzy, humiliated. Harper was waiting. One look at my face and she didn't ask. She just hugged me. "They're trying to rewrite your whole life," she whispered. And they were succeeding. Later, as we sat in the parking lot, I stared out the windshield and said the words I never thought I'd say. "They've all turned against me, every single one." I spent the next morning staring blankly at my computer screen. Emails piled up. Deadlines blinked at me like polite accusations. But my brain was static. I couldn't focus. Couldn't think. Couldn't believe that in just one afternoon, my entire family had stood up, under oath, and rewritten my life as a villain's origin story. I closed my laptop and whispered aloud, "I need help." And as if the universe had finally decided to stop watching me drown, my phone buzzed. "Harper." "I found someone," she said. That afternoon, she introduced me to Daniel Vega. Young, sharp, calm in that way that lets you breathe for the first time in days. He was a civil litigator with a reputation for taking on complex family cases and winning. He sat across from me in Harper's kitchen, sleeves rolled up, glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, a legal pad already filling with notes. "So," he said, "walk me through it from the beginning." I told him everything, every transfer, every request. Every time I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. I showed him the spreadsheets, the texts, the emails. I showed him the screenshots Harper had saved, the clips from the porch argument I'd recorded on my phone, the entire paper trail we'd spent weeks assembling. Daniel nodded, methodically reviewing each document. When I finished, he closed the folder and said the first words that made me feel something close to hope. "We'll show them who the real victim is." I stared at him. "You think we can win this?" "I think we can bury this," he replied. "What they've filed is thin, emotional distress, based on voluntary support. That's not a contract. That's manipulation dressed in sentiment." He leaned forward. "But we're not just going to defend. We're going to prove motive. We'll show the court how your financial support was exploited, how they used guilt, family pressure, and public shaming to keep you compliant." Harper beamed from across the table. "Told you." We worked late that night. Daniel combed through bank statements, flagging patterns. Transfers that aligned perfectly with Vanessa's shopping sprees. Sudden withdrawals before family trips. One year, I'd even paid for Vanessa's wedding florist and forgotten. He found it all, and he made it make sense. "You didn't just support them," Daniel said, highlighting Rose. "You enabled their lifestyle, and when you stopped, they called it betrayal." He paused, looked at me. "That's not family, that's financial abuse." The words landed like truth always does, heavy but freeing. By the end of the week, we had a thick binder of evidence. I watched as Daniel printed the final exhibit, still half in disbelief. "This," he said, handing it to me, "is your story. In facts, in proof, and soon, in court." And for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. Courtrooms are never as dramatic in real life as they are on TV. No gasps, no gavel slams, just fluorescent lighting, tired clerks, and a judge who looks like she's already seen too much of humanity. But on the day of my second hearing, the tension in the room could have cut glass. Daniel sat beside me, calm and focused. Across from us, my parents whispered with their attorney. Vanessa was there, too, flawless makeup, hollow eyes. Aunt Marie and Alicia sat behind them, ready to play their parts again. But this time, they weren't the only ones with a narrative. This time, I had evidence. Daniel stood first. "Your Honor," he began, "this case hinges on the question of obligation. The plaintiffs argue that my client, Ms. Gallagher, owed them ongoing financial support." What they don't tell you, what they hope you won't see, is that her so-called support was the result of years of manipulation, not mutual agreement. He moved to the exhibit table and held up a thick binder. These documents, bank transfers, text messages, emails, and recorded calls will show a clear pattern. My client gave out of love, and when she stopped, her family turned on her. The judge motioned for him to continue. Daniel played the first clip. Vanessa's voice crackled through the speaker. It was a phone call from a year ago, when I'd recorded when I felt the first seeds of suspicion. "Emma always bails us out," Vanessa had said, laughing. "She's like built for it. Guilt is her love language." The courtroom went still. I saw my mother flinch. Then came the texts. "Hey, sorry to ask again, but can you cover Dad's deductible this month? We're behind on the car just until next Friday, promise. You're such a blessing, Em. We don't know what we'd do without you." It was all there. Line after line. Proof that I hadn't agreed to support them permanently. I'd been conditioned to never say no. Daniel turned toward the judge. "This is not a case of broken promises. This is a case of broken boundaries. My client didn't abandon her family. She refused to be exploited by them." Their lawyer stammered through a rebuttal, but the tide had already turned. When Vanessa was called to the stand, she tried to play innocent. "I just thought we were close. That's what family does." Daniel stepped forward calmly. "Ms. Gallagher gave you $8,000 to cover your car loan. You never repaid it. You used her credit card for your bachelorette trip. You had a joint Amazon account that billed directly to her business card for over 2 years. Were any of those things discussed as loans?" Vanessa's eyes darted. "No, I mean Emma never said she expected it back. But you never offered either," Daniel said, voice sharp now. "You accepted, you expected, you took." The judge watched silently. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. I didn't cry, I didn't plead, I just told the truth. My entire adult life I believed love meant saying yes, that if I gave enough, helped enough, smoothed things over enough, maybe they'd finally see me, not just as a paycheck, but as a person. I looked directly at my parents. They didn't. The judge took a long pause before speaking. "This court finds in favor of Ms. Gallagher. The claim is dismissed with prejudice." My knees nearly buckled. Daniel squeezed my arm. "It's over." But it wasn't just the case. It was the cycle. It was finally over. I thought winning in court would feel like fireworks. But it didn't. It felt like an exhale, like loosening a too-tight necklace that had been digging into your skin for years, and only then realizing how badly it had been choking you. But the real satisfaction, that came quietly a few days later in the form of poetic symmetry. I wasn't planning to drive past my parents' house. I really wasn't. I was headed to a meeting across town and took the old neighborhood route without thinking. Habit, until I saw the U-Haul, parked crooked in the driveway, rear door open, items stacked inside without care. Cardboard boxes, scuffed plastic bins, a toddler's bike, a crock-pot sticking out like an afterthought, and there, standing on the porch, Vanessa. She looked smaller. No extensions, no manicured nails, no smug confidence. Just a woman who'd run out of lifelines. On her hip was her youngest, face red from crying. Her older child stood behind her, arms crossed, backpack dragging along the ground. No sign of Kyle. He must have made himself conveniently absent for the fallout. Vanessa rang the doorbell. Twice. Mom opened it wearing her robe, hair wrapped in a scarf. They didn't hug. There was no warm reunion. Just a long, silent look exchanged between two women who had once feasted on judgment together, now picking over the bones of their own undoing. I parked across the street, watched from behind tinted glass like I wasn't really there. Like I was just a witness to the slow unraveling of the family web that used to trap me. They talked for a moment. Nothing warm. I could tell by the stiff shoulders and clipped hand gestures. Vanessa bent down to grab a diaper bag, balancing the baby awkwardly as she lifted it up the porch steps. No one helped her. Not Mom. Not Dad, who eventually appeared in the doorway, arms folded like a bouncer. No hugs, no comfort. Just the unspoken truth. The safety net was gone because I'd been the net, and I had cut the cords. Vanessa disappeared inside. Her older son followed, dragging the last of their bags behind him. The door shut without a second glance toward the street. That's when I let myself breathe. It wasn't revenge in the way people think of it. It wasn't petty. It wasn't loud. It was justice served lukewarm, the way life often does, quiet, heavy, and entirely deserved. I whispered to no one, "She'll have to work for once." And that was that. That evening, Daniel and I finally took that dinner rain check. He picked a place tucked between an old bookstore and a flower shop. Candlelight, jazz in the background, and zero chance of running into anyone with my last name. He ordered wine. I ordered pasta. And for the first time in years, I didn't check my phone every 10 minutes expecting another emotional landmine. We laughed. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't taste like relief or irony, but just joy. At one point he said, "You're different now." Lighter. "I'm not carrying everyone anymore," I replied. We shared a long look, and then he reached for the check. Instinctively, I reached for it too. "Emma," he said, placing his hand over mine gently. "Let someone take care of you this time." I froze, and then slowly let go, because maybe this was the new normal. Maybe I could be someone who wasn't constantly bleeding herself dry to earn love. Maybe I could be someone who said no and didn't apologize for it. As we stepped out into the cool night air, the city buzzing gently around us, Daniel's hand brushed mine. I didn't pull away, not this time. And in the quiet of that small moment, I knew something with absolute clarity. The storm was over, and I had survived it. Peace doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't ring the doorbell or cue up a victory playlist. It's quieter than that. It shows up in the spaces where panic used to live. For me, it arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the judge dismissed the lawsuit. I was making tea when I realized. My phone hadn't buzzed once all day. No missed calls. No guilt-laced voicemails. No unexpected expenses disguised as family emergencies. Just the faint sound of the kettle, and Willow curled beside the window like she knew the world had shifted. I stood there, hand wrapped around a mug of chamomile, and asked myself a question I hadn't asked in years. What do I want to do today? The answer? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that was beautiful. I started sleeping with the windows open again, letting in the Denver breeze. I burned the cinnamon candle I'd been saving for someday. I ordered a new throw blanket in a shade of deep emerald that made my living room feel alive again. It was like my life had gone colorblind for years, and now someone had flipped the saturation back on. One afternoon, I walked past the drawer that used to hold all my bank folders, the ones marked family, Vanessa, house contributions. Empty now. I didn't throw them away. But I did close the drawer and stack a potted succulent on top of it, a quiet monument to what I'd survived. Daniel texted the following weekend. "Daniel, walk and coffee, you need a post-victory tradition." We met near Confluence Park. The sun was sharp, but the air had cooled, and for once I didn't feel the need to rush through anything. "Do I look different?" I asked as we strolled the path by the water. He glanced sideways. "You look lighter." "I haven't had a panic dream in 10 days, I confessed. No voicemail from my mom in a week. I walked into my office this morning and didn't feel like I was bracing for a collapse." "You're detoxing from codependency," he said with a smile. "Withdrawal comes first, then clarity." He paused at a small bridge and leaned over the edge, watching the water slide beneath us. "I've been thinking," I said, "about how long I mistook guilt for love and duty for loyalty." Daniel didn't interrupt. "I thought if I could just be good enough, give enough, they'd stop looking at me like I was a resource." "You weren't a daughter to them," he said quietly. "You were a life raft." I nodded, blinking against the sudden sharpness in my eyes. "But you're not that anymore," he added. "You climbed out of the water. You saved yourself." I exhaled, and for the first time I believed it. Later that night back home, I curled on the couch in silence. No news playing in the background, no open laptop, just me, my tea, and the soft sound of a life no longer in crisis. At 9:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Dad, we need to talk." I stared at the screen. For a moment, my stomach tightened, reflex, not emotion. Then I hit delete. No reply, no second thoughts. The old me would have written a careful response, agonized over tone, replayed the potential fallout. But the new me, she didn't need to explain her boundaries anymore. She lived them. 1 year. 12 months of quiet mornings, no emergency texts, no voicemails laced with guilt. It took me longer than I expected to believe that the silence wasn't a trick. That peace wasn't just the pause before another explosion. But it wasn't. It was the absence of a storm I'd stopped standing in. And it started here. A small cabin nestled outside Taos, Daniel's idea, though he pretended it was mine. We found it on a whim, booked it for a weekend, and never stopped coming back. Eventually, we just bought it outright. It's not fancy. The porch creaks when you shift your weight. The walls smell faintly of cedar and burnt coffee. There's a stack of half-finished crossword puzzles on the kitchen table and a cat that thinks she owns the living room. But it's mine. And more importantly, I am mine. This morning, the sky was that kind of high-altitude blue you only get in New Mexico. Crisp, honest, nothing to hide. I was sipping coffee on the porch when I saw the envelope. Plain, cream-colored, handwritten Vanessa. I recognized her handwriting immediately. I didn't hesitate to open it. Curiosity isn't the same thing as vulnerability anymore. I just wanted to see what version of herself she'd choose this time. The letter read, "Emma, it's been a year. I've thought about writing so many times, but didn't know if you'd even read it. I guess I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how things turned out. I never imagined it would go that far. Maybe we both got caught up in it all. Maybe we both said things we shouldn't have. I wish you'd understand how hard things have been for me, for the kids. I hope we can find a way to rebuild something, even if it's small, for the sake of the family." Vanessa, I read it twice. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so Vanessa. Carefully worded blame-sharing, apology without admission, a plea for connection that still tiptoed around accountability. I folded the letter and walked inside. In the hallway closet, there's a box, labeled in silver marker, "Closure." Inside it are photos I couldn't bring myself to toss. Printouts of bank transfers I don't need to prove anymore. Copies of the court filing. The final ruling. And now, Vanessa's letter resting like a ghost in paper form. I don't hate her. I don't need her apology, and I certainly don't need to rebuild something. I have built something without her. Something that doesn't require me to bleed quietly to keep others warm. Daniel was in the kitchen flipping pancakes with his usual over-the-top flair. "You look like you just read a state budget proposal," he said, glancing up. "Close," I said, waving the envelope. "Letter from Vanessa." He didn't ask to read it, didn't ask what it said, just asked, "You okay?" And I was. "Yeah," I said, "I'm good." We ate on the back porch barefoot, side by side, watching the trees sway like they knew we were finally still. After breakfast, I wrapped my arms around him from behind as he rinsed the dishes. "Thank you," I said. He turned, brow raised. "For what?" "For being the first person who didn't ask me to prove I was worth loving." Later, I stood in the doorway and looked out at the hills beyond our cabin. Not searching, not waiting, just breathing. I used to think peace was boring. That quiet meant loneliness. But now I know it means sovereignty. It means choosing who gets access to your heart, and saying no without flinching. If you've ever had to walk away from people who confused love with leverage, if you've ever been called selfish for reclaiming what was always yours, if you've ever stood alone and wondered if you made the right choice, let me tell you something. You did. You absolutely did, because some lessons cost a lot. But dignity. Dignity is worth every penny. Where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments and tell me, have you ever had to cut ties to protect your peace? I'm Emma, and this is what it looks like when a woman finally chooses herself.